everyone to the Women in Deep Tech Global Investment Platform podcast. And on this podcast, we welcome investors, founders, innovators, and the women who are going to change the world. So today we're really happy to have Dr. Karen Joyce here to tell you a little bit about herself, her life, her motivations, and her work. Karen, welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Jane. Thanks so much for having me.
Would you be able to just give a little bit of your background, what you do, why you became interested in the scientific and technical area that you're working on?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess just as a bit of context setting, what I do is I'm really passionate about helping people understand more about Earth by viewing her from above. So I work with satellites like what you might see on Google Earth and drones to be able to capture data of Earth and monitor changes over time. I have probably one of the oddest pathways to get where I am. I studied at university. I guess that's not that strange. But then when I finished my PhD, I went into the military. I spent a few years in the army as an engineering officer. I worked then in New Zealand in natural hazards and government before coming all the way back around to academia. And I now have a full-time faculty position at James Cook University, but I have two companies that I've spun out of JCU as well, which I guess is why I'm in this founder space as well. So a little bit of a mix of bits and pieces that I guess I pull all together and somehow it fits.
No, that's fantastic. And I'll ask you a little bit more about your companies in a minute. Deep tech is something that a lot of people don't understand very well. So we're asking everyone who comes onto the podcast, just give us your brief elevator pitch. What is deep tech to help people understand what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and it does mean a lot of different things to different people. For me, deep tech is all about, it's very much embedded in data science and the technology that we use to both capture and then analyze the data as well. For me, that's very much in the space of Earth observation. So it's about the platforms we use, whether that's satellites or drones, the technology that we use to run those platforms and to build them in the first place, and then how we drill into the data that we receive from them to really extract information as well. So there's a lot of artificial intelligence. There has always been artificial intelligence throughout the 25 years of my career. That's always what we've been building things on. A little different to the generative AI that we see today, but lots of different forms of AI that are really embedded into deep tech in all different places.
Thank you. So let's go on to one of your companies, at least GeoNadir, because I was speaking to you last week about it.
GeoNadir is a company that we created to really help people understand more about Earth, and in doing so, being able to work with drone mapping data to start with. We know a lot of people have drones around the world. One of the ways in which we work with drones is to take photos of Earth and then create maps out of those. The process to do that, not just to capture the data, really to analyze it, is kind of clunky. The software is typically janky and dated. So we wanted to create software and create experiences for people where they're able to use this super valuable data to make better decisions about how we work with our planet. So we know that we actually have enough data to be able to solve the biggest challenges that we have on Earth. But what we don't do is we don't really use it well. In fact, we know that we only use about 1% of Earth observation data. And that's just really not going to cut it when we think about some of the really big climate challenges that we have. So we wanted to create experiences for people where they're able to access the technology and really use it to their advantage to help with transparency and understanding of what we're doing on Earth, and holding people accountable to how we're behaving as well with the planet.
Let me ask you then another question, because that's a big idea, But you guys have actually now got a company. You're a startup. You're trying to turn that big idea into a scalable commercial proposition. Why did you think about doing that? And in doing it, and I know you've had another company before that you founded, some of the lessons that you've learned from founding companies that would be useful to other women who are like you, scientists at heart, but actually have got a commercial idea that they would like to build into a business.
Yes, that's such an interesting question, and I would say we became a company. So certainly, our first company was very much an accident, and so our first company, SheMaps, just grew out of an experience that we were creating for a local high school, and then it just became something that everybody wanted. And the only way to deal with that was to create a company to run those experiences. We were a little bit more strategic when we created GeoNadir, our second company, in the sense that we knew that there'd been things that I've been working on throughout my career for the past 25 years. And there's only a certain level of impact that you can create while you're within a university situation. At some point, I realized that if I wanted to scale my impact to reach more people and to do this in a sustainable way, we needed to have a company to house the technology and to continue to build it. And so we created GeoNadir as the second spin out of James Cook University to really be able to scale impact, have access to different types of money and funding that you don't necessarily get within a university, but actually still have the beauty of straddling the university ecosystem as well. So you can get a little bit of both worlds. In some ways that's challenging, but in other ways it really does open up other doors. I guess over this journey, I have found that there's a bit of pushback from people who have always been in the academic situation, and they feel that academics should be for free. And why would you create a company that now charges people to do what you do? But for me, one of the things that I've found as an academic is that you can get funding to create research projects, but it's really difficult to continue ongoing funding. And so we see so much fabulous work getting started, and then it just sits on the shelf because there was no business model ever to continue sustaining that idea and to continue to make it work operationally. So for me, that was what was really important when we created GeoNadir, was to take my research work and the technology we were starting to build, but have a life for it that becomes self-sustaining.
That's really interesting, because I think what you're telling us is that you have a passion for science, you have a passion for what you're doing, and the way that you can see making that sustainable is through creating a commercial operation, because doing it through an academic centre wasn't going to enable you to do that. But let me ask you, just in terms of your journey as a female founder, are there any particular aspects that you think are worth highlighting, your experiences or things that might be of interest in others, whether they're like you being an academic who's founding a business, or just people who've got a great idea and they want to create a business out of it?
Yeah, I think there's lots of interesting things for women founders. And I think one of the early statistics that I heard was less than 2% of venture capital goes to women. So you already feel very much on the back foot when going into conversations with investors and feeling very much the underdog there. Also having that feeling of where the money goes to, and even getting involved in accelerators and those types of programs, or going to conferences, symposiums, forums, and all of that. It can feel really isolating as often the only woman in the room, and particularly in technology. So there might be some other areas where there's more women in my discipline. There's about 20% women, and then we think of the scientific discipline and then layer that on top of it, the capital and the startup ecosystem as well, being the 2%, very much in the minority, and that can feel really isolating. Probably one of the biggest things that I found really helpful in my early days was a group called SheEO. It's now called Coralus, So it's
Yes.
a group out of Canada with quite a good contingent here in Australia. And I found some really amazing women in network and good connections through there as well. So really enjoyed being part of that group. But aside from that, I think it is a challenging space for women. And the more organizations that I see supporting female founders, I've been fortunate to get government funding that's been specific for female founders. There's stuff out there to elevate the work that women do, but it still can be challenging to find your crowd as well, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, and that's one of the things we'd like to do is connect up the tribes all around the world who are doing this and help people feel like there is a network there that they can reach out to. As you said, you can go to conferences, but if the conference is predominantly full of men who know each other, it's not always easy to get into a conversation. They're great things to think about, and we hope that you'll be part of our network, and we'll be wanting to build mentors and other people for the women founders, as well as trying to raise money for the investment platform. So, thanks for sharing, and we know it's tough, and that's one of the reasons we're doing this work. But having said that, one of the things that shines through in everything you say is how passionate and inspired you are about your work and what you're trying to do. And so it'd be great if you could just end on an uplifting and inspiring note with some kind of message for women in science, women in deep tech, who, like you, want to forge a career that's beyond the science and being able to create a scalable company.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think probably one of the things that I enjoy most about doing this type of work is the autonomy I have to do things the way that I want, the pace that I want, as long as I have the funding to support that. But it's so much more freeing than being in another organization or institution where you're held by somebody else's goals. It's 100% being driven by the things that I value and that I can see worthwhile to community and to planet as well. So that's a really big thing for me. But I think one of the saddest things I hear say that they're not happy with what they do, and they've been working for 20 plus years as a barista or whatever it might be. I really want to do this other thing. You just have to reach out and try the things that makes you happy, because you're always going to be better at the thing that makes you happy as well. So if I can encourage other
That's it.
people,
It's like have the courage to try. And one of the areas where women need a lot of support and encouragement, because they're often more fearful to jump in than men. Thank